As we go through our lesson today, let's look for about one thing that maybe can help you in your marriage and the rough places that you might find yourself in your marriage. Is an invitation to mutual corruption. And that's important when this came out, this book, and the quote that followed that book by this other author, it's 1999. It's in the wake of, on the heels of, our President Clinton and his debacle with Monica Lewinsky. Man, we don't want to go there again, do we? We don't want to relive that event. But now, think about this comment that he made here. Is it an invitation for mutual corruption? The last 13 years, have you seen a trend toward more corruption in America? We can go back 3 days, can't we? To Colorado. And we realize that the shootings are not less, but they are a continuous and growing thing in America. And there's a fear just being in a public place in America. We can think of it in those terms in America. One commentator was talking about that last night on TV, national broadcast. And he says, you know, we can look at that, and we can look at the 6,500 who have died in Afghanistan and Iraq. But do you realize that in America there are more deaths by suicide than by murder? Do you realize in America that 6,500 pales in comparison to the unborn lives that are taken every single day? And then he made this comment. I thought, well, this is unusual in national broadcast. He says, you know, the problem that America has, it's a sin problem. And I thought, whoa, I can go with that. That does fit well with what I observe and what many of us observe. Now, it's easy for us to do the big picture kind of a thing. Think about the folks out there, over yonder. How about right here, right like this afternoon and tomorrow and this next week and this next month in our lives? Because we're affected by the attitudes. This 11th commandment, thou shalt not judge. Are we not? And after all, isn't it Jesus says, judge not lest you be judged? And so we kind of fall into that whole thing ourselves. And who am I to judge if he walks out on her? I mean, I don't know what goes on in that family. And who am I to judge? And who am I to judge if out of convenience they make this arrangement? And out of convenience, I mean, who am I to judge if that child is aborted? And who am I to judge? And we get in all these gray areas and these black and white areas in life, and we say, God, help us see forward clearly your will for our lives and for our world and our own families. It's the kind of thing that we hear in the book of Judges. God help us. Now, you won't find on any page, any chapter, any verse in the book of Judges where you'll hear it is ringing through your ears. Because in the book of Judges, where we are in our daily Bible reading today, you read through it and you say, I can't believe this. God, help your people see their way forward in their lives. It really is the 11th commandment, the book of Judges. Now, who am I to judge? She probably even said this about how he uses his money. You go to the book of Judges and you go to the 6th chapter. And dominating the 6th, 7th, and 8th chapter of Judges is the person of Gideon. Gideon is this one who's called by God to lead God's people into battle against the Philistines, the Amorites, and the other nations who have come together to fight and destroy the Israelite people in the promised land. Well, Gideon's not really sure, really, are you going to save us? And so, God, how about this fleece thing? And we remember that fleece episode, and he puts out the fleece. Now, God, if it's your will that this is going to be the case, you'll save God, your people, make that fleece wet. And all the ground around it dry. And he wrings out the fleece the next morning. He says, now, I want to push my luck here, God, but could you do just the opposite? And make the ground wet and the fleece dry tomorrow morning? God obliges Gideon. And sure enough, that's the case. And then so he gathers God's people together, this great force, and God whittles the force down. He whittles it down. He whittles it down to 300. Gideon's thinking, what are you got up your sleeve, God? And so they're given a jar, a lantern, a sword, and at the command, a sword for the Lord and a sword for Gideon. They shout, the jars are broken, the lanterns are lit, and they charge in on an unexpected, in the middle of the night kind of experience on the enemy, who rout themselves. They kill themselves in running in fear of what is coming on them. It's a great battle that's won. Chapter 7, chapter 8. And in chapter 8, God's people come to Gideon and say, we will make you king. He says, I don't want to be your king. No, sir. God's going to be your king. Good answer. Good response, we say. But he says, you could give me a little bit of the spoils, the gold that you found as you pillaged these peoples and these nations. And so they bring the gold to Gideon. And what does Gideon do? Notice verse 27 of chapter 8. Gideon made the gold into an ephod. In other biblical texts, an ephod is something that the priest wore, but biblical scholars, commentators think this is another kind of object that he makes. He makes the gold into an ephod, which he placed over in his town. All Israel prostituted themselves by worshiping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. Who are we to judge what he does with his money, with his gold? Things are kind of just a little bit off-key, a little too much off-key, Gideon. And we come to this next very prominent figure in the book of Judges. According to the angel that this prominent judge, as it's announced to his mama, he will be a Nazirite. He will take a Nazirite vow. He will, this is Judges chapter 13, he will not take any alcoholic beverage. A strict kind of Nazirite vow this man will take. We see his birth, and we see this in Judges chapter 13 and verse 24. Jumped ahead there. A woman gave birth to a boy, named him Samson. He grew and the Lord blessed him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him. In chapters 14, 15, 16, we see how the Lord has stirred Samson. He's a Hercules type. Nobody can stop Samson. He, with the jawbone of a donkey, kills 1,000 Philistines who've come up to him. He takes and he gathers up all these foxes, hundreds of them. He ties their tails together. He puts a torch to them. How in the world could he capture all these foxes? I do not know. But he does this. He ties their tails together. He puts a torch to the tail, and he sends them out into the grain fields of the Philistines, and they burn down all the grain fields. The Philistines are enraged. One battle after another, Samson is a man that cannot be reckoned with. And we say, hurrah! But then we see his vengeance, his revenge, his anger, and the sordid affairs. Delilah. And even his death is just kind of off-key. His suicide. This is 16, verse 30. Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he pushed with all his might. And down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than while he lived. Who are we to judge about his personal life? Who are we to do that? It's something that we say today, but also something that comes to us as we read through the book of Judges. All this heightens in an incredible way in the last 5 chapters of the book of Judges, starting with chapter 17. And you start reading these chapters, and these 5 chapters kind of stand out in Scripture. There's not a severe condemnation for the things that are narrated in these chapters from God's inspired writer. And you think, why not? I mean, it's so obvious the wrong that is being done, the moral corruption in Israel. Right out of the gate, chapter 17, a man robs a great sum of money from his mother. When she curses the man who has stolen this money, not knowing it was her son, he promptly returns it to his mom. And she says, "I'll give it to the Lord." And she asks her son to take the money, or a portion of it, and to make an idol? Wait a minute, these are God's people. They know the 10 Commandments, right? But no, they're governed by the 11th commandment, thou shalt not judge. He makes a shrine for his idol. The shrine where they was to go, Israelite people, were Shiloh, where the Ark of the Covenant was. But no, we have a backyard shrine, religion, temple going on, and he makes his own son a priest. Levites are supposed to be priests, but a Levite does come by, and so he hires the Levite to come in and be the household priest for his family. He's got all things under control because he's got God's spokesman in there in his household, it would seem. But this priest seems to be one who goes for the best money. The tribe of Dan comes by. They're on search for a place to reside. They cannot seemingly drive out the Philistines, the Amorites, in their own land, and so they ask this Levite priest to kind of bless them, secure their victory as they go up to Laish and on an unsuspecting town, slaughter the people and make it their town, the town of Dan. And we come to the last verse in the book of Judges. And it's thou shalt not judge. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as he saw fit. It's what you like to do, man. Whatever goes for you is good. I'm okay, you're okay. Everything's fine here. That's what we see in the book of Judges. So who am I to judge? That was back then. Today, right now, 21st century, our era. My 4th semester at Freed-Hardeman University, that's a few years ago, I had a class with Thomas Warren. Thomas Warren, he knew well syllogisms and knew well Christian evidences. And we had a class on Christian ethics with Thomas Warren. Thomas Warren had us read a text. In that text, the authors tried to capture what's coming on in America as far as its the ethics of America. And they cited Playboy magazine. And in Playboy magazine, there was this situation where a woman writes in to the editors of Playboy magazine and says she has questions about wife and husband swapping, mate swapping. So Playboy magazine in 1971 put out her question as a poll for the readers of that of that magazine. When both partners consent, is her question, is adultery immoral? Again, 1971, 40 years ago in America. The responses came in, and here's one of the responses that was cited in that textbook, Christian Ethics. The first mistake is asking if something is moral at all. Individual feelings are the most important thing there is. To realize that each man is a law unto himself. Every man did what he saw fit. Judges chapter 21, verse 25. I suggest to the lady one rule that eliminates the need for all others. Think for yourself. Such was the beginnings of what was known as Situation Ethics, Joseph Fletcher's book, Situation Ethics, The New Morality, written in 1966. It's even quoted, this was quoted in that book, what is moral is what I feel good after, and what is immoral is what I feel bad after. Ernest Hemingway? Imagine. Now, most of us would not admit that we make our decisions, our moral decisions, based on how we feel. But, so who's to judge? Who's to judge? Rob and I were talking about my lesson for this Sunday, and I said, I got judges to preach on, and this is going to be a challenge, judges. And I said, you know, it's real easy to, as we go into biblical text, look for the bad news of the biblical text, parallel with bad news in today's world, and it always happens. It's easy to make the bridge because man is not changed. He's always the same. Bad things happen then, but same kind of bad things happen today. I said, but the good news in the text, God's response, God's solution to the dilemma, the things that we see that are so off-key, and the dissonance we find in the book of Judges. It's just not there. What do I do? And this is what came to me. I turned the page. Ruth chapter 1, verse 1. In the days when the judges ruled, this is the era of the time of the judges. This little book of Ruth is kind of a window into the personal lives of individuals, how they were affected. And here's our good news, guys. Here's our positive news. There was a famine in the land. That's not good news. It's a crisis time. There's anarchy in Israel and the promised land, but there's also famine. And a man from Bethlehem in Judea, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. Here's the beginning of a story that unfolds for us in this chapter. It's, though hard times, even in Moab, for this family of Israel. Elimelech, Naomi, and their 2 sons go there. It's the case that the father, the husband, Elimelech, dies. But they're 2 sons of Naomi, and they find 2 wives. One of those wives is Ruth. Ruth. But then the 2 sons die after 10 years. I mean, this is a lot of bad luck here for this family in this faraway land where they've migrated just to survive as a people. So Naomi says, I'm going home. And the girls are acting as though they're going with mama or mother-in-law home, back to the promised land. Well, the one daughter-in-law kisses Naomi goodbye. But Ruth, verse says here in chapter 1, in verse 14, Ruth clung to Naomi. Look, said Naomi, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her. And these words come to us. Ruth replied, entreat me not to leave you. Or as the NIV says, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. There I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me. Did you have it read at your wedding? We did, at our wedding. And whenever I get a chance, when I do a wedding, I say, let's consider this passage to be read. Because the passage talks about being permanent in a relationship. It talks about an enduring faithfulness. It talks about loyalty of this woman, Ruth. So very important. So much the good news that comes to us out of this sordid situation of the judges and their time. Loyalty is defined as allegiance, the act of binding ourselves to a course of action. It's fidelity to a superior, or to duty. It's love. That's what loyalty is. We need to reflect on loyalty in our tough times in our marriages. Because in America there is this strong pull, this undertow that's pulling people out, this undertow of, hey, watch out for yourself. You owe no man anything. You're entitled to your own rights. Who's to judge you? The 11th commandment. I call us as God's people in this church to be loyal. We need a lot more Ruths in our world today. I call us to be loyal as there's this sleep-in attitude that sometimes we get on a Sunday morning or a Wednesday afternoon. Loyal to church, not to slack off. But as our focus is marriage, to be loyal to our mates, to be steadfast with our mates, to be enduring with our mates in this life. The rest of the story, Ruth's story, is a beautiful story. She returns with Naomi to the promised land, and she finds Boaz. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. Then he went to her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The women said, Naomi, praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. And he will become famous. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, had given him birth. Wow. So special, really, now. Ruth is the great-grandmother to King David. Ruth is the great-grandmother to the Christ, Jesus Christ. A call to loyalty in our marriages. Chris Spilleman, linebacker for the Buffalo Bills. Kind of a guy that you always want on your football team. Good linebacker, tough worker, loyal, committed to his team. He loved the sports of football. In the 95 season, he played injured the whole season. Coming up on the 1998 season, all that took a second place, a distant second place to his staying home. Doing the dishes, taking care of the kids, taking care of Mom. Mom had breast cancer surgery. Mom went through the chemo and all the sickness that follows that chemo. And a reporter came to him there at the home and says, now, hey, would you like to kind of finish out the season? We need you on the team here at Buffalo Bills. Wouldn't you come on, help us out a little bit? He said, in a heartbeat, I would come back. But what kind of man would I be if I backed out on my word to her? I wouldn't be a man at all. We beckon you to come